Hey guys, what is going on? I'm sure all of you have seen the Apple event that just got released. Totally great. I think all the transitions were cool, all this, just everything about it. Apple usually does these things really, really well. But one thing kind of stood out to me, and that's the MacBook Air versus the MacBook Pro. I am a little bit confused of what's going on here because just a quick overview, they are the same exact thing. Not literally, but they're basically the same exact thing. Let's start off with what the differences used to be in the past. And that's that the MacBook Air thermal throttled, the cores were just not up to par with how the MacBook Pro was. You couldn't really unlock the pure power of the Intel Core i5 if you chose that, just due to the MacBook Air's poor design. Now we fast forward to the future, where the MacBook Air and the MacBook Pro share the same exact chip, share the same exact thermal capability, share everything basically. And you start to wonder, why are they marketed at a $300 price difference? There is one standout feature that most of you are probably gonna mention, and that's the lack of a fan in the MacBook Air versus the MacBook Pro. But to that I say, this iPad Pro, which has been proven to have an amazing power output, also doesn't have a fan. And it's also way slimmer and has less things going on than the MacBook Air. So I don't think a fan versus no fan is really gonna be an issue, unless you're doing like 10-hour long renders or something like that, which most of us probably aren't gonna do. So let's just kick this off. I don't wanna make this video too long because I really just wanna hit home on the differences between the Air and the Pro because this is just all very, very confusing to me. So let's go over to the iPad Pro with Magic Keyboard. Beautiful device right here, amazing. Okay, so going on Apple's website and going to the compare Mac models option and everything, we can go through just a bare bones spec comparison between the Air and the Pro from 2020 and with the M1, sorry. And just as like a third comparison here, we're just gonna throw in the MacBook Pro 13 from 2020 without the Apple M1 chip. So as we start to go through here, you're gonna notice something a little odd, right? First of all, price difference. Clearly, they said this before, as $1,000 and $1,300, you can get $100 off with the Apple Education discount, but disregarding that, these are the baseline prices. But as you continue to go down, they both support the 8-core Apple M1. They both have up to 16 gigs of unified memory, and pay attention to the wordplay here. Unified memory versus just memory. Because we're gonna take a look at this in a second, if you go to the buy page, none of these actually support 16 gigabytes of RAM, which is very interesting here. They both support up to 2 terabytes of storage, both have amazing battery life, a 2-hour difference. Yes, it's important, but really it's not that much to make you go crazy. They're still both amazing with battery life. Touch bar, still controversial. I don't really like it. Most people don't like it, but if you wanna claim that that's a big difference between the Pro and the Air, yes, that is a big difference. And now we go into like the more specific section. Both of them have the Apple M1 chip. Both have an 8-core CPU, which is still the Apple M1. The one difference that's a little interesting is that it says an 8-core GPU, or up to an 8-core GPU, and the other one says just 8-core GPU. Maybe with the other model for the Air, it has an 8-core GPU. I'm not entirely sure. This one's kind of weird for me because we're gonna look in a second at each of them individually on the Apple page. Memory, they both say 8 gigs and 16 gigs, which is also weird to me because again, we're gonna take a look at it. Both say up to 2 terabytes of storage, both start with 256 gigabytes of SSD, which is really small in my opinion for starting. Should be 512, at least for the Pro, it should be 512. For the Air, sure, 256 gigs, that's fine. Display, still relatively the same, 400 nits versus 500 nits of brightness. It's been like that for a while. You're really not gonna notice that big of a difference unless you're literally using your MacBook in the glaring sun, which most of us probably aren't gonna do. And that's it for this, right? Just a quick overview of the specs from Apple's website. But now if we go into the individual pages and we look at the MacBook Air first, this is where things start to get a little bit weird. So the MacBook Air, okay, never mind. That solved one of my suspicions. It's a 7-core and an 8-core GPU. That's not as big of a difference as I would think. That solved that part. But the one weird thing is this unified memory. So it says 8 gigabytes of unified memory, 8 gigabytes of unified memory, and no option for 16 gigabytes of unified memory. This may just be because it's not released yet, but knowing Apple, if they release this page, it should all be on here 100%. So something makes me think that something's just off here. It also says up to 2 terabytes of storage, and it says 512 gigabyte SSD here. Again, I feel like something's wrong. But that's not like the main point of this video. The main point is the differences between the two. And if you compare the starting price, $999 for this exact model of the MacBook Air, which is probably what most of us are gonna be getting, because none of us, well, not none of us, I mean, a lot of us don't get the high spec'd out models of laptops, at least from Apple and everything. If we look at this, just remember the specs here. I'm gonna shoot on over to the MacBook Pro. You're gonna notice here that for $1,300, you're honestly getting the same exact model. It has the same Apple M1 chip. It has 8-core GPU instead of a 7-core GPU, which is a big difference. I can't see that being a determining factor for the $300 price increase. Everything else is pretty much exactly the same. 256 gigs of starting storage, 256 gigs. Both have an 8-core CPU. I mean, listen, for a starting model, and this is why I purchased the Air. I don't know if I said that earlier in this video, but yeah, I purchased the MacBook Air to test out and everything. This is why I purchased the MacBook Air. For a starting model, or starting, whatever you want to call it, like entry-level model device, there's really no difference between the two. The one difference is the fan versus no fan, but again, like I said, iPads don't have a fan. It's not the same, I understand, but just it goes to show you Apple's thermal capabilities and how they're able to maximize the chip's performance versus the build of the device and everything. I'm hoping this gets cleared up in the future, but what's not gonna get cleared up is these entry-level models being almost exactly the same. I have a strong feeling that something isn't right here and that the MacBook Air and the MacBook Pro should be very different. But while I was watching the event, I was thinking in my head, they're sort of the same. And I wanted to clarify this because they didn't really mention RAM during the event or mention any of the specific details during the event. But now looking at this on Apple's website, they are honestly the same exact thing. And I want to make this video sort of short because I didn't want to have to go too deep in depth because I don't have anything. This is still all really new, so I don't want to say anything that's totally wrong. But just as my impressions on everything, my opinion on everything, something does seem a little off here. And if this is the case, if all this is totally true and 100%, which it should be because Apple published everything, like I don't think they'd mess up like that. There is honestly, in my opinion, no reason for anyone to go for the Pro unless you are doing super long renders where you need a fan to stop your device from thermal throttling. But for just general renders, for like video renders like I do with 4K footage or photo editing, video, like small video editing, stuff like that, I can't see the Pro really being crazy. I think the Pro is gonna be mainly for machine learning and stuff that take a lot of CPU intensivity, I don't know if that's a word, a lot of CPU intensive tasks for a long period of time. And if that's the case, sure, go for the Pro. But for most people who buy the Pro for the Pro name and for video editing and everything, I don't think this is, I don't know. We're gonna have to see. I'm gonna get the Pro, I'm gonna get the MacBook Air in soon. I'm gonna do a lot of tests on that. I'm sure a lot of other YouTubers are gonna do tests on the MacBook Air versus the MacBook Pro. So we'll see how that all unfolds. But I wanted to make this quick impressions video just because I'm confused and I wanted you all to be confused with me. So hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, please leave a like and consider subscribing if you wanna see the MacBook Air content that's coming out soon. And I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out.